What's up, NBA fans? What's up, all sports fans? It's your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel. Just want to give a shout out to the rest of the crew. I'm talking about Shy, Kelvin, and Jermaine. For everyone who's tuning in, I hope that you support Behind the Bench, become a subscriber, and help make the show the best that it can be. Now, I wanted to share this one with you. It's a gold nugget right here. There's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of static about, how history should be interpreted and what's true and, what's fiction and all this jazz, right? So let's go back to what was, by the late 80s, the best rivalry in basketball, the most intense rivalry in basketball. Now, historically, it's Lakers-Celtics, Celtics-Lakers. And there's been some other great rivalries throughout NBA history, NBA lore. But by the late 80s, this was the best, most intense rivalry in the NBA. I'm talking about the Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls. Now, current commentary is trying to convince people or sway people to believe that the Pistons never really took Michael Jordan as a threat, as his team leader now alludes to after all these years, where the NBA fans who watch those teams battle each other year after year after year, we know what's up. We know the truth. We know what's real. We know what happened, right? We know it went down. Okay, so, and this is what's unfortunate about trying to distort history, because it makes you go back, pull back the layers, and then in the periods that you are turning down a player, but all you're trying to do is trying to define history the way it played out. Now, Isiah Thomas is one of the all-time greatest players in league history, right? Michael Jordan said himself that he felt that Isiah Thomas was the second greatest point guard he ever faced, behind Magic Johnson. So therefore, that gives you an idea as to who Isiah Thomas was. And as a player who was like 6'1" in height, he was a leader of a team that won back-to-back championships. You can't take nothing away from Detroit, despite, the negative stigma, or the stigma that they had placed on them by playing dirty, being the bad boys. You know what I'm saying? But underneath all that, they was a tremendous defensive team, and they had great guard play with Isiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, and then Vinnie Johnson coming off the bench, as they call him the microwave. Okay, so Detroit was a great team, and they broke through the Laker-Celtic dominance of the 80s. They did that. And you have to respect them for that, because that's very, very hard to do then. But when the team leader wants his team to get the credit, now he don't want Michael Jordan to get the credit. And that's the problem. Because like Jordan said, when he suffered defeat to the hands of the Pistons in the playoffs, he always shook their hand out of respect for the opponent and for competition and the league. Okay. So Isiah Thomas has said over the past year or so that Jordan was not his main threat. It was the Lakers, Celtics, Philadelphia, right? Dr. J. I don't recall the Pistons ever really facing the 76ers in the playoffs, especially by the late 80s. I don't recall them facing each other in the playoffs. I know they played the Pacers, they played the Knicks, of course the Celtics, then the Bulls, but I don't recall them. They played Atlanta Hawks too. I don't recall them ever having to play the Sixers in the playoffs. But nonetheless, I'm just trying to set this backdrop. Okay. So now fans are to believe that Michael Jordan was no threat, right? But it's crazy, because when the Pistons went on to win their first championship, peak prime Detroit Pistons, who won 63 games during the 88-89 season, they went 15-2 in the postseason. They swept the first round, they swept the second round, and they swept the finals versus the Lakers, who was denied a three-peat. The only 2 games that they lost was to the Chicago Bulls, who upset the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round and then upset the New York Knicks in the second round to get the conference finals, right? Okay, so Cleveland Cavaliers, many NBA journalists or whatnot, they predicted that they would go to the finals in '89 over Detroit, over Boston, over anybody in the Eastern Conference at the time who was considered a prime contender. Knicks, Hawks, Bulls, everybody in the East, right? Magic Johnson had predicted that the Cleveland Cavaliers would become the team in the 90s. And Jordan shut that down in '89, right? The New York Knicks won the Atlantic Division, right? Jordan and the Bulls upset them in 6 games. Now, going into the Eastern Conference Finals, now the previous year, in their first encounter in the playoffs, Detroit beat Chicago 4-1. Okay, they beat them. Okay. Detroit advanced to their first ever NBA Finals. So in '89, they were looking to win their first championship, right? And they battled in the Eastern Conference Finals. Bulls won game 1 in Detroit. Detroit tied the series. You go into game 3, right? Jordan scored 46 points in that game 3 and hit a bank shot on Dennis Rodman, one of the greatest defenders to ever do it, and Isiah Thomas, to prevail and win game 3 by 2 points. And that's the game where after doing the post game interview, then Coach Doug Collins said, the play was to get the ball to Michael Jordan, everybody else get the what out the way. Right? But mind you, Isiah Thomas, who's an all-time great, this don't take away from what he achieved in the league, but it's how he trying to disrespect Jordan and his legacy. So he said that Jordan wasn't a factor, right? They didn't take him serious. Well, after they lost game 3, Chicago went up 2-1. They was on the verge of upsetting the Detroit Pistons for winning their first ever championship in their prime. And that was the beginning of the Jordan rules. Where doing the Bad Boys documentary, where Joe Dumont said that Isiah Thomas went to the Lakeshore Drive in Chicago and sat down and really thought about what Jordan was on the verge of doing. And they talked on the phone for hours, as Isiah Thomas said, talking about 23 in red, and they came up with the Jordan rules. But remember now, he's saying now that Jordan wasn't a factor. Well, I'm finna play this audio to show and illustrate what Isiah Thomas was saying about Michael Jordan in real time, in the heart of battle, in the heat of competition. Now listen to this audio real quick.
We knew Michael Jordan was the greatest player, and we tried to use it as a rallying cry to come together. We had to do everything from a physicality standpoint to stop him.
Detroit had Jordan rules just for Michael. I don't know how you came out of it alive.
Now, that was Isiah Thomas when he said, we knew Jordan was the greatest player. He didn't say Magic, who had won 5 championships that decade in the 80s. He didn't say Bird, who had won 3 championships. He said Michael Jordan. So they felt if they can beat the Chicago Bulls, whoever they face in the finals, they would have whoever that team's best player was posed less of a threat to them. The Clyde Drexlers in the 1990 finals, right? And remember, they swept the Lakers in 4 games. So their biggest threat during their championship run was Michael Jordan. And that's the benefit of upholding history instead of gravitating to hyperbole and fiction. See, the truth always went out. Like I said, man, Isiah Thomas, man, I respect Isiah Thomas. He one of the greatest players to ever do it. But you cannot deny who Michael Jordan was. Because if they did not come up with the Jordan rules, Michael Jordan would have beat them in 1989. So I just wanted to drop that real quick. This is JB for BTB. Until next time, Behind the Bench.